Hi, everybody. Kris Vallotton here. This month on Cultural Catalyst, we're diving into the most pressing issues of our time, the mental health epidemic. Now more than ever, people are struggling with anxiety, depression, fear, and even suicide. And I believe it's time to have real conversations about what's happening beneath the surface. That's why I'm launching this special series, and we'll bring on some special guests to talk about spiritual, emotional, practical aspects of mental health and how do you actually get free. This is a topic I'm deeply passionate about, and it's a big reason why I wrote my book, Deliver Us from Evil. In it, I explore the unseen battle of our minds and the powerful tools God has given us to break free.
Good to be with you, and I hope through all of it, what what matters to me about all this, not only that people find the healing and the restoration, all things that all of us need, right? Jesus said he came to seek and to save what that stuff that's broken is what the Greek means. Um, but I want God to get credit for it because it's all right there in the scriptures. All of these ways that will heal us and all of these processes, God has given us his ways to do this. And a lot of times people, and I'm a big believer in therapy. Yeah, they ought to go to therapy, but they don't understand sometimes that many times, most times, if it's working, what's happening in therapy are processes that God has commanded us to do. And a lot of times in our spiritual circles, we're not doing what the New Testament says.
Hi, welcome to the Cultural Catalyst, where we teach you how to live fully alive, co-labor with God, and change the world. I'm your host, Kris Vallotton, and I have a very special guest, Dr. Henry Cloud, who you wrote 45 books, but you wrote the Boundaries book, which I read as a young man a long time ago. And I'm so excited to have you. I'm earnestly excited to have you. Thank you for being on the Cultural Catalyst.
Well, it's good to be with you.
Yeah, hey, tell us a little bit about your story. A lot of my audience probably has read your book, but wouldn't know very much about your life.
Which book were you?
Your Boundaries book. I know you wrote.
Okay.
Is your Boundaries book your best selling book ever?
If not, it's close. And part of the reason is, it's been out for a long time. So
Yeah,
it struck a nerve.
it did.
It actually came from one section of my first book, which was Changes That Heal. And for some reason, the boundaries piece, I mean, it's an issue for everybody in life. So that,
It's.
you know,
I think it gave people permission, don't you think,
yeah,
to do what they needed to do, and then also some practical instruction. I mean, for me, I think I'm a person who is naturally confrontive, but the tools on how to honorably set boundaries was really insightful for me. I honestly did read that book a long time ago and given it out to many people. So
well,
that's the book I know you by.
if you're naturally confrontive, it was probably more helpful to the people close to you than.
Those are the people I didn't give it to.
I know John and I used to joke all the time. We're not letting our staff read this book. Start saying no all the time.
Exactly. Well, tell us a little bit about how long have you known the Lord? Did you grow up in a I mean, I'm genuinely interested in how did you find the Lord, and did you grow up in a Christian church, in a Christian home?
Yeah, it's interesting. Speaking of books, I just wrote a book. It's just out this past year. It's called Why I Believe,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's interesting because it's kind of the story. The subtitle is A Psychologist's Thoughts on Suffering, Miracles, Science, and Faith. And that was kind of my story. I grew up in a, it's like a Christian home. My parents were believers, very faithful believers in the South, in United Methodist Church, and their faith was lived out mostly by serving the poor. They were very involved with the poor,
Oh, wow.
and people of service. But when you say Christian home today, that's like daily devotions and Bible verses all over the kitchen and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't like that, and I was um, my parents were not too ballistic, if you will, about their
Yeah.
faith. They were quieter about it, but very active. And so I was a believer from a young age, but I didn't. And as I say in the book, I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I had a place in my faith because it's like I liked God, I just didn't like his friends. all the all of my friends and the people I really identified with they weren't much into faith, and then the people that were, they had all these, they didn't go to school dances and didn't play golf on Sunday and all this, and so I kind of didn't know where I fit, but I was always a believer in Jesus since I was little. And then what happened was I was a competitive golfer and got recruited to play golf in college, and that was my dream. And
Wow.
I had an injury and had to quit um, after my sophomore year, and I hit bottom. And as I tell about the story in the book, I mean, I truly hit bottom. I mean,
Oh,
I could barely function. I took a semester off school the next semester, really, really depressed. And I reached out to God, and He showed up. And
wow.
um, that's where I learned that He wasn't just a concept; He actually does stuff, and experienced several miracles to kind of get me where I needed to be. And so that started the path. And then I was an accounting and finance major, and felt like He was calling me into the ministry. And Um, then he told me to go into the field of psychology. I was a business major. I know this is my junior year, so I had to change my major. Um, and there you go. And so,
That's amazing.
yeah,
Because I was going to ask you what, was it your crisis that kind of led you to want to be a psychologist? But it sounds like you just had an encounter with God.
well, it was God in the crisis. I mean, through He was leading me into all this. I started reading stuff and um, got really interested in it. Something, one of the things that that God does is He uses people to call things out
Yeah.
in us, um, and people started to call it out. I mean, randomly, just saying, "Have you ever thought about going into counseling or psychology? You seem to see things in the scriptures that apply in ways that we don't." And I'm going, "I don't know, it's just right there."
That's amazing.
And that's kind of how it happened. And then I took a year out after college to work in a Christian psychiatric unit and to kind of validate my calling. And then there you go. And so that's how it started. And
You have helped so many people,
well,
probably you've helped many more people that you've never met than you have even working with people, one on one. And you've had such a huge impact. I have a question for you that, uh, we live in the most fatherless generation right now, in which our fathers are alive but not home. And I wrote a book on fatherlessness just a few years ago. So I've got involved in the statistical studies of fatherlessness. And from your perspective, people are delaying marriage, uh, having children out of wedlock, just the whole. I don't have to describe it to you. It's pretty evident all around us. What input do you have for where we are, and and how would you What would your wisdom be for how to move back to valuing the family?
Uh, how long do we have? You know, there's so many things that go with that. You know, spiritual trends, societal trends, economic trends. You know, lots and lots and lots of things that go with that. Um, but one of the most one of the most important things in a person's life is a father. And we're wired, we're wired developmentally. Uh, and you hear a lot of people say, well, you get your concept of God from your father. That's just so ridiculous when people say that. Yes, you get part of it,
Yeah,
your father, but a mother, God designed this thing. We need both. In fact, David said in the Psalms, God, you taught me to trust you at my mother's breast. And the this this two-parent thing was the way that humans develop is in the beginning, there's a merger and a symbiotic relationship with the mother. And that's where we learn the primary functions of life, which have to do with trust and attachment. Nothing verbal, nothing thinking, nothing conceptual. And then what happens is an infant gets their tummy full. In fact, the word wean in the Hebrew, we think of weaning a child as, oh no, that's bad. The word wean actually means to have been dealt bountifully with. In
wow.
other words, this baby is so full of love and connection that then they get fueled to look outside of that dyad. This gets really important when you're talking about the problems you're talking about.
Yeah,
So a baby then begins to look outside, and there's his father, or or whoever's playing these roles.
yeah,
They move from a dyadic reality in life, it's just me and the other, to a triad. And so now they've got somebody to connect to and identify with, and now they're learning. I believe it's sort of we have a Trinitarian God. He doesn't exist in a dyad, he exists in a group.
yeah,
And and from there, a lot of things happen, which is a person begins to have an identity that's not dependent on one love object. And so that gets to a lot of maturity stuff. And when you talk about homes that, where a kid doesn't have a father, or somebody, in locus parentis, as we used to say, in the place of a dad,
yeah,
or fathering, I think is a better way to look at it. We don't have to, doesn't have to be mother or father. We need mothering and we need fathering. And that's a
yeah,
big, big, big important role, I think, of the body to come in and provide for what's God's biggest cause, to orphans, right?
yeah,
And so if somebody has mothering and fathering, a lot of things happen developmentally in their heads. Well, now in a lot of instances, we have young young men, I think, who haven't fully differentiated from mom.
yeah,
And you got, on and on and on in, I started saying 20s, but even longer, they and you hear the women talk about this. The single women, if you talk to a lot of them in their 20s and 30s, they'll start to describe, well, I can't find a guy that blah blah blah. And I go, it sounds like you run into a lot of little boys and not a lot of men.
yeah, exactly.
And and that's a big deal. We all need um we all need different things in our that we internalize and all that, and developmentally. And so I think it's really, really, really important. You talk about what do we do about this? It's really, really important, for young men and young women to have good fathering in their lives, because it does
Yeah.
things to equip them.
It's really good. We always say it takes a mother to give birth to a boy, but it takes a father, at least a father, as you pointed out, a fathering role to give birth to a man. So we have a lot of people who grow old, but they don't grow up, and there's no rite of passage in their life, and so I think it's
Yeah.
yeah,
And the rite of passage itself is, and even if you take the, the man boy stuff out of it, just the rite of passage into adulthood, there's so much going on in the parenting genres today that are keeping kids infantilized
yeah,
and keeping them children. But worse than that, they're not building agency and competency and resilience in kids because of this. There's a lot of words for it, and you can call it whatever the local brand is, but kids are not, with a lot of parenting styles today, kids are not being required to learn to have agency and to deal with the world.
it's true.
And my girls are 23 and 25 now, and it was even true. It had started. That's about when it started. As I
Yeah,
look back, I remember when I go to these parent toddler things, and the toddlers would be wanting that toy or whatever, or doing this, and somebody would say no, and another parent would go, no, 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 don't tell them no, give them another choice, redirect them, give them. I go, whoa, 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 what's wrong with no? I go, well, you don't want to hurt their self-esteem. I go, are you kidding me?
exactly,
I don't think their boss is going to care. I
exactly.
don't think the speed limit is going to care.
Yeah,
Part of being a good human is to be able to talk about boundaries. We got to be able to say no, but we also have to hear no and not have it cause a crash in my life. And we got to
exactly.
be able to love somebody that says no to us. I mean, that's part of internalizing emotional regulation and a bunch of other stuff. And so part of it is that, Galatians 4 says when we were children, we were under guardians and managers until the date set by the Father.
Yep.
And then, 1,000 years later, they started having bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. But there was always this day when, like my dad always told me, said, son, I didn't get to go to college. You're going to go to college. I've already put the money up for you. Your job is to make the grades to get in. My job is to pay for it. But when you're done, I'm done.
Yeah.
He said, you can come by here for a sandwich if you want, but that's it. So don't get me started on the parenting thing.
Well, I mean, I play basketball still, so most of the guys I play basketball with are in their 20s and 30s, and I've been playing at the same place for 26 years. And it's really
My orthopedic surgeon said he makes his living off guys like you. I said, well,
well. I did break my Achilles tendon, but that was 26 years ago. Yeah.
Well, I said, so Doc, what's a guy like that? And he goes, guys over 30 think they can still play basketball.
No, wait a second. I could come back and say you got hurt playing golf, bro. You got hurt playing golf.
Well,
So,
what do you think?
do you still play?
You think basketball is a tougher sport than golf? You go to a Tiger that?
Here we go. Do you still play golf?
Oh yeah.
See that? I still play basketball. There it is.
I found a surgeon a couple of years after college that was able to fix it. So,
see, here we go. Touche. But what I was going to say is I come to the gym and these young guys come in with earbuds in both ears or a headset and they have a hoodie on, their head covered, and they're out there playing basketball, and they don't even know how to deal with humans. Literally raised by machines, don't know how to have interaction with humans. Yeah. Got to have, how do you even play basketball when you can't hear? It's just, it's crazy. Like the world we live in, people and then they get on social media and say the most terrible things as if they're talking to nobody. It's crazy. It's a crazy world we live in right now.
Yeah, the annihilation of human connection. I mean, we're seeing the effects of that everywhere. But we everything God has designed is fueled by relationship. It's a it everything. I mean, you take a baby and feed them and water them, but if they don't have an attachment, if they don't have a secure love,
Yeah.
brain sizes are smaller, their immune systems don't work, they can even die of marasmus or failure to thrive. There's something about this incarnational, immaterial, metaphysical connection that actually drives the physical aspects of us. Harvard did that 75-year study, what makes people successful, and success meaning, truly thriving in life.
Yeah.
The number one fact, it wasn't IQ, it wasn't education, it wasn't your zip code, it was the quality of their closest relationships.
Wow.
And that's the created order. I mean, it just is. And we have really, really, really gone down a lot of paths that are are doing away with incarnational experiences that build people, and that's you know that's a problem.
We've seen a lot of high level leaders that have fallen morally, integrity. Many of them have been my close friends, are my close friends. And what do you? Gosh, this is probably a big old can of worms, but I live in this world. We have a network of churches, and so I'm in the lives of so many of these guys and gals. Actually, what would be your advice? Like, you probably have written 5 books just about this, but what do you think that our current culture is aiding in this, or do you think that it's just that social media is exposing it more, or do you think there's any change in culture that has aided in this maybe lack of accountability or lack of connection? I've got I've got about 40 young leaders that are beginning to lead our church, and they see, a massive person we've all learned from and grown in and followed and grown in God, and then all of a sudden we hear of their immorality, and my young teams are like, how do I make sure that doesn't happen to me?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, but not
Yeah,
not because you're a leader, dude. I mean,
yeah,
you want to make sure it doesn't happen to you because you're a person.
yeah. Are you more vulnerable as a leader, you think?
Here's something for sure that you can say: you are more vulnerable to being. I don't mean this as in any pejorative way,
Yeah,
but you will be called fallen. Okay, if you're not in leadership, a lot of people not in leadership, and they're further down in organizations and companies and business who do things that they shouldn't be doing, but they're not fallen, right?
yeah.
So I don't really know the demographics and statistics on what the percentages are of people that are at the top versus the middle and all that. But let's get to the real issues.
Okay.
In and I've been working in this area for a long time.
Yes, you have.
Probably starting. I don't even. It'll seem like I'm old if I say how long. But my a long time ago with some big Christian ministries who all came together, I headed something called High Risk Leaders Task Force,
Oh, wow.
and, and so I've been working on this
Wow.
for decades. And when you look at it, um, there's not one there's not one cause, but you do a factor analysis of all of it, and there are some factors that leaders should be really really aware of.
Okay.
Okay? Now, one of the big ones is this: that all of us come into adulthood not fully baked. All right. There's
Right.
stuff that happened in your developmental years that you look like an adult, but depending on what that path, there's some undone areas of you, some things that didn't get built in at the factory. And then after you started coming off the assembly line, there were some wounds and injuries and things that happened to you. All right.
Right.
It's everybody to different degrees. Some a lot, some a little. But what happens is until we face our issues, until something forces us to face our issues or we voluntarily do it, then what we do is we have ways of staying away from them and ways of defending against them. Okay? Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. That's
Yeah.
kind of what Satan comes and offers us instead of, in the real sense, godliness. You can get promoted and that'll feel good, and then you won't have to feel this other stuff. You can you can be admired and that'll feel good, and you can have another sexual experience and that'll ward off the darkness and the emptiness one more time. In fact, in Ephesians 4, it says, don't be like the Gentiles who are, and remember, he's talking to believers. And he uses this phrase, who are separated. He's talking to believers, separated from the life of God.
Wow.
And then he goes on to say, through the darkening of their minds, he says, and who have moved beyond feeling, is the literal translation. Sometimes you hear hearts have been hardened, beyond feeling, so as to give themselves to sensual experiences with the continual lust for more. All right, so
Wow.
watch this progression. They can't feel their wounds. They can't feel their needs. They can't feel any of this stuff anymore, but there's some emptiness still driving it. And they look for one more sensual experience of all those lusts, and it never fulfills it. So there's never enough power. There's never enough fame. There's never enough money. There's never enough, sex. And it says that'll go on and on and on. So what happens is sometimes these positions actually augment the defensive compensatory ways that somebody's staying away from the cracks underneath. All right. For example, somebody's really disconnected and they have a lot of charm and they have a lot of gifts and all of this. All these people are going around that, well, that feels like connection, but that's pseudo connection and it'll never feel it. I'll give you another example. Sometimes people grow up and their role, maybe they had a sibling who was a washout, but they were the hero of the family, and their role was to have to be the star and always look good and all this and get the good grades and all this. Well, that continues, and this role augments that, but the underneath stuff's never being faced. Or they're the caretaker in the family. Well, then they get in the pastorate or in leadership, and they're just pouring out and giving and giving and giving. And somewhere underneath there,
Something
when was
broken.
Jesus tempted? When was he tempted? It wasn't at the wedding feast when he's having a good time and all of his friends are there.
Yep.
He had been deprived for 40 days of everything human.
Yep.
Well, there are parts of people that have been deprived or have been wounded or whatever for a long time, and Satan comes along and just offers them a way to feel better, and they do it. That's part of it. I'll give you another part of it. Is in a lot of instances, and I'm truly not speaking of any that anybody would know about because I don't even know the particulars, but I've been in enough organizations where I go into the board and hand 3x5 cards out for anything. And I'll say, okay, you guys want me to help here, I want to ask the board a question. I want, in silence, each person answer this question. Does this board serve at the pleasure of the senior pastor or president, or does the senior pastors serve at the pleasure of the board. And it is amazing how many times you get a very different answers. And sometimes people, the Bible's word for this is overseer. And sometimes another factor of this is leverage and governance. And I've seen some situations where a board tries to address something, and somebody goes down the street and starts another church. And they take all the admirers with them. I mean, there's a lot of different dynamics that go into all of this stuff. And so you can't just say one thing, but we do know that when you have good governance in place, because all of us need overseeing.
Absolutely.
Okay. When we have good governance in place, but we also have a culture that is not only allowing but prescribing for leaders to be and get healthy. One of the best models I ever saw in this, there's a large mega church in, well, I'll leave the identifying factors out
Yes.
so I can make the point. But their pastor had a great, 30-year run, no issues, whatever. But early on, the board of elders had a subcommittee that reported to the board. Actually, it wasn't a subcommittee, it was a committee outside the board that reported to the board, and they were funded. There's a line item on the budget. And that committee's mission statement was the care and health and training and well-being of the senior pastor. And
Wow.
on that committee, there was a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a former senior pastor of a big church, the head of HR for a big corporation, and I don't know, a couple of other people. And they had to report to the board of elders. And for 30 years, they took care of him. Now, they wouldn't go into
Wow.
the particulars and they wouldn't do the work. They would find people to help. But I mean, I work with major corporations. I have one client company. They spend this is a secular business. They spend $100 million a year on coaching for their senior leaders, one-on-one.
Wow.
Okay. The church, a lot of times we can't get them to give somebody enough to go pay to see a therapist. And it's like we require, we're bleeding a lot of these people as well. So there's enabling that goes on. There's idealization that goes on. There's power structures that aren't working right. There's broken people that we expect to be not broken because they're, Jesus said clearly, he said, don't call on anyone on earth your leader, your father, your rabbi, or your teacher, for you are all brothers. And he put us all at the same level. But what we'll do is there are seats of authority that do have authority, but we think we'll put the person, like he said to the Pharisees, you've seated yourselves in the chair of Moses, right?
Yeah.
Seated yourselves. And we can't let that happen. We
Yeah.
got to have the seat to have authority, but we got to realize this is a person. That's all we're talking about is people. And they're broken and they're unruly. First Thessalonians says we got different types. You got the brokenhearted, you got to heal them, you got the weak, and you got to help them, and you got to confront the unruly. And if all three of those things aren't happening in leadership, it's right there in the scriptures, you're going to have problems.
Wow.
I mean, we could go, there's a lot more about this.
Oh, this is incredible. I earnestly, it's not on the questions that my team developed these questions. And I came in this morning and I said, I have a question I want to ask because I'm in the trenches with leading, first of all, leading this younger generation and trying to help with some of the folks who have fallen, and then trying to help the congregations and the movements. And I'm like, these are very complicated problems. These are very complex problems.
Well, it is and it is and it isn't. I mean, you're right. And I said to myself, there's a lot of factors that go into this. But when you get down, you start to, lift up the hood. And if you have some people sitting on the table that know how struggle happens and how it's maintained. It's fixable.
Yeah.
And it's not like we don't know what's going on, but a lot of times the things aren't being applied that that are needed. I'll give you an example. I did for about 5 or 6 years with one particular organization. We did 5 or 6 times a year. We did an evening and a full day with pastors. We bring 25 in at a time, and an evening and a day, to work with them. And so the first night I handed out a questionnaire because I was gathering data on this for years. And one of the questions was to pastors, senior pastors. Do you have a relationship in your life that's outside of your stakeholders where you can be 100% transparent, talk about everything that's going on truly in your life? 80% of them said, no, I don't have anywhere like that. 80%.
Wow.
Number two, do you have any relationship in your life that is dedicated in a non-mutual way only to serve you, to help you develop your leadership capacities? 80% of them said I have nothing like that.
Wow.
Another question. How many of you in the last year would say that you've got some issue that's reached clinical proportions? Fear or anxiety or stress or an addiction or whatever. Guess what the number was? 80%.
80%?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Said sleeplessness or loss of energy or burnout or depression or, porn addiction or whatever it is. But the problem is there's a lot of things that go into this, but part of it also is it is very difficult for a pastor to find the New Testament prescribed methodology of healing brokenness, because the evangelical models that exist, I mean, if you go do an analysis of Job's friends, their
Yeah.
sermons, what did they say? It's like a walk through a Christian bookstore. They said, well, if you spent more time in the Word, if you knew God's precepts better, if you had more faith, okay, let your righteousness be your guard. Today's I'm going to claim my position in Christ
Exactly. Yeah.
righteous, right? Put the sin far away from you. All right? Fascinating.
Yes.
And Job says to them, "You're worthless counselors. Oh, that your wisdom were silenced." And then God spanks him and gives the cows to Job in the end. But you go to the New Testament, and what we see is that there are a lot of good things about the evangelical model of growth and how you deal with these. Do we need to spend time on the Word and know the Word? Absolutely. But here's an interesting one. Everybody knows this verse. You shall know, fill it in for me. You shall know what?
The truth.
The truth. And the truth shall set you free. So they take that, and that means you got to spend time on the Word, and the Word will set you free, right? I have asked so many audiences, tell me the phrase right before that, and nobody can. What it says is, if you hold to my teachings, then you shall know, and the word is an experiential know,
Yep.
truth, and the truth shall set you free. There's, build your house on the rock, and the winds come and the rains come. And what he said was, the person who hears my words and puts them into practice.
Yeah.
All right, so now you got a New Testament that gives us all of these practices that the body, as Ephesians 4 says, held together and joined and connected by every supporting ligament, as each part does its work, heals itself.
So good.
So how does your body heal itself? You got an infected finger. We don't amputate it and put it in a drawer with a book on anatomy. when it's connected, the head organizes it, the heart sends new oxygenated blood, the immune system goes and fights the infection and gets it out, the liver and the kidneys cleanse it, you're eating food, it metabolizes it, turns it into new cells and nutrients that it needs it. And we don't have pastors a lot of times that are deeply involved in incarnational and spirit-led metabolic healing processes that would make them whole.
So
In
good.
fact, they can't even do that because lack of safety and blah, 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 blah. But there's a lot that goes into this.
Man, this is so good. I say to a lot of our team, a lot of people have great, I'll call it accountability, all the things you were just talking about, accountability, not necessarily account for your disability, but account for your ability. And as you grow, yeah, say it
there for a second. A lot of people, when they talk about accountability, tell me what that accountability looks like.
Well, I would encompass the word accountability around everything that you just said. It's that I actually have real relationships in which people actually do talk to me about how I'm doing, about my stuff. They encourage me, they exhort me, they correct me, they guide me, and they're there for me. And I would say
are they in that structure also are they healing the broken parts? In those accountability relationships, can you get into the trauma maybe that you've experienced, or is that happening somewhere? That's great. But a lot of people, when they talk about accountability, what they're doing is it's a rear view mirror of, were you good last week?
Yes.
Did you look at porn? Did you do this? Did you do this? The accountability, literally, the etymology of the word means to answer to a trust. And it's forward facing. I just wrote a book on trust. And the accountability piece of this, a pilot would never fly a plane without her accountability relationships, because she's got a plan and it tells her quickly if she's flying too high or too low or on the wrong heading or whatever.
There you go.
Forward
Exactly.
facing is to help you get somewhere. It's not to just check up on what happened last week. So you're describing a healing environment. That's key.
And one of the things that it's one of my models is, if you don't trust someone more than you trust yourself, then if you're in deception, the nature of deception is you don't know you're deceived. So if you don't have trusted people around you that actually can speak into your life, and oftentimes, some of our, at least I'll speak for myself, some of the greatest places of dysfunction in my life over the years have been places I didn't know I was dysfunctional. I didn't.
100%.
So how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that if you don't actually know you're in it? And if someone tells you, hey, you are negatively affecting our relationship or our culture or whatever, and that doesn't feel true, how do you get out of deception if you don't trust someone more than you trust yourself? And I think this is a part, in my opinion, this is a part of relational accountability, like real relational accountability.
Look, you're hitting on something so important. We talk about stuff like self-awareness.
Yeah.
Where does self-awareness come from?
Feedback.
Other awareness. Even our pain regulatory systems. Okay. You see a toddler will fall down, and what do? They turn and they look at their parent, asking the question, am I hurt? You got one parent says, dude, you're fine. Keep going. They go, okay. And the other one goes, oh no. And then they start crying. And so their pain tolerance, which is in large part psychologically, wired, all of a sudden everything hurts me. And now I'm offended. And today we got that in the narcissism of I'm offended by everything and triggered by everything. And
I'm a victim. I'm a victim.
so we've got this this whole thing about you're so onto something important. This whole thing about self-awareness, it comes from others noticing what we can't see.
Exactly.
And the Bible is replete with commandments for us to be serving that function in each other's lives. And it's very, very clear that if you can take it and hear it, you are called a wise person, and a wise person will love the one that gets fit. Thank you for telling me that. I didn't.
You're quoting Proverbs right there, bro.
That's exactly what Proverbs says. Correct a wise person, he will love you for it. Not only that, he will get better because of it. He will become wiser. And as David said, God, let a righteous man strike me. I will consider it as a gift. Right?
Yes.
And you got the fool. Do not confront a mocker, lest you incur insults upon yourself. Do not confront a mocker, because they will hate you for it. And
exactly.
on and on and on. And so somebody's ability, if they can't take feedback and they're offended by it, or here's a big one, something doesn't look right on the expense report, or the way you said you're going to be over here and you were here, and where were you? And watch out for this one. Oh, so you don't trust me? Or
yeah.
What are you questioning my integrity? Well, I wasn't, but I am now. Because
yeah. I asked you a simple question. Why are you defensive?
Exactly. And some people think they are entitled to trust and entitled to deference. And a lot of this stuff that you're talking about, and there are narcissistic people who should not be given the keys to the kingdom. It's
exactly.
And so there's but here's another problem. Pastors, please hear me on this. Find somebody or somebodies who are not stakeholders in your performance. Okay?
That's big.
You want to be close to your team and your elders and your body and all of that stuff. I get that. But all of them have what's called a dual relationship, which means they're your friend, and now maybe they're your accountability partner, and they're your parishioner, and they're a donor, and whatever.
And you're their boss, maybe.
That's even worse. And so whatever they tell you is going to have an effect on them. So de facto, they're not truly giving you sometimes clean advice that's the best for you.
Yeah.
Because there's all these other entanglements. So find some people outside of your system that their life is not going to change because you rise or fall. Their life is not going to change because you stand up and fire 20 people. Their life is not going to change because whatever it is, they can give you the best. So get out of your system. Really, really important.
That's so good. Dr. Cloud, how can people get in touch with you? I'm sure. Would you like to give your personal phone number so that some of my
actually, after this conversation, I'm forwarding it to your phone.
On a serious note, how can people? drcloud.com.
Yeah,
that's it. drcloud.com.
Yeah, there's an info site up there. There's a lot of if you go to the website boundaries.me.
Okay.
I have over 100 courses on there.
Wow.
And 20 something long form webinars on a lot of these topics. And if you go to all this is on the homepage of drcloud.com.
I'll make sure we put a connect to it, team, so that they can connect right to you. What's your latest book you just wrote? Is it out yet?
Well, the latest one was unlike any other book I've ever written. It's called Why I Believe. I wrote it to my non-believing friends of why I'm one of those weirdos. And now Christians are using it to give to their friends because all of us have problems talking to somebody about faith because
absolutely
it's divisive in the extended family, and now Thanksgiving is canceled or whatever it is because And so I've got all these friends that aren't believers. So I wrote a book. This is why I believe. And it's really a spiritual memoir of what God did. And so that's the latest, but my latest leadership book was a book called Trust.
Oof. I'll get that book. My team, please make sure I do get that book. I really appreciate you being on here. I have literally followed you for a long time,
Yeah.
and you have made a huge impact on my life and the life of our movement. And love to have you come maybe speak at a conference, or leadership conference we do,
Be fun.
and get connected with you.
If all you gotta do is call me and feed me,
Well, I hear you eat a lot, so we'll have to have a budget for
You
that.
don't hear that, you see it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cloud, for being on here. Your wisdom is incredible, and your insights are beautiful. I think we could talk about this for a few hours. I know it's something you've kind of dedicated your life to this subject we just kind of ended with, and so much wisdom. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Well, it's good to be with you, and I hope through all of it, what matters to me about all this, not only that people find the healing and the restoration, all the things that all of us need, right? Jesus said he came to seek and to save what that stuff that's broken is what the Greek means. But I want God to get credit for it, because it's all right there in the scriptures. All of these ways that will heal us and all of these processes, God has given us his ways to do this. And a lot of times people, and I'm a big believer in therapy. Yeah, they ought to go to therapy, but they don't understand sometimes that many times, most times, if it's working, what's happening in therapy are processes that God has commanded us to do. And a lot of times in our spiritual circles, we're not doing what the New Testament says.
Yeah,
We're doing a bunch of religious stuff that some of it's important, some not. But God's word, I want people to see it's all in there.
exactly.
In Why I Believe, I've got a whole big section of how the science of psychology proved the scriptures to me to be true. I just
So
want
beautiful.
people to God's word is amazing. I want them to see it.
I'm going to make an effort to make a connection with you. And I'd love to bring you in maybe to our BraveCo conference where we're ministering to men. My son's got a great movement called BraveCo. I was just thinking about how awesome it would be for you to come and share with our men. And
Well,
so I will. I'm going to proactively connect with you.
well, it's been a pleasure. It's good to talk to you.
It's good talking to you too. God bless you.
Okay, you too.